I was totally stunned when my husband, Jonathan, suddenly suggested I move back to my parents' house, even though they were already living with us. His unexpected demand left me speechless. He seemed convinced that his reasoning was sound and, with a blunt attitude, asked, "Do you have a problem with that? Don't argue. I'm fine with divorcing you if you do." His behavior had become colder recently, and I'd been grappling with my own frustrations. Divorce had crossed my mind, but I never expected him to be the one to kick me out. After all, I was the one handling our $3,000 and $200 monthly expenses. Did he even recognize that? As I stood there in disbelief, his frustration grew, and he snapped, "Leave this house now. My parents won't be comfortable with you here." I couldn't grasp why I was suddenly the one being told to leave, but in that moment, I agreed. "Fine, I'll take everything with me," I responded. He seemed satisfied with my compliance and, without another word, said, "Then do it," before walking off. Without hesitation, I reached out to a store to sell my things. "I'm Betty, and I live with Jonathan, who is 3 years older than me. We met through mutual friends, and what began as a casual introduction turned into an entire day spent together." Jonathan shared his dream of becoming a voiceover artist, and I was captivated by his deep, calming voice. I've always been fond of such tones. He must have felt the same. As we exchanged numbers and started planning more outings, before long, we were in a relationship, though it never formally came up. I had just finished college and started my career, and dating someone with more life experience like Jonathan felt exciting. My friend Laura had some reservations about our age gap, but I brushed it off. "It's only 3 years," I reassured her. I genuinely liked Jonathan and felt confident he cared for me. Laura eventually warmed to him, trusting my judgment. Jonathan and I had been together for 2 years when he brought up marriage. I'd already told my parents about him, including his age, and they were eager to meet him, hopeful for our future. I often wondered when he would propose, and in his usual style, he did it during one of his visits to my apartment. We were just hanging out, enjoying each other's company. It wasn't a particularly romantic setting, but it felt right for us. Without much ceremony, he asked, and I casually responded, "Sure, let's get married." Perhaps we both took a laid-back approach to it. After Jonathan proposed, we did the usual rounds of visiting each other's families, but when we went to his, it quickly became apparent that I didn't fit in. Their home was filled with decor trying to mimic old-fashioned luxury, but it all felt forced. His parents wore expensive clothes and flashy jewelry, trying to look wealthy, and it was clear our tastes and values didn't align. I doubted we'd ever truly bond. During the visit, Jonathan's mother even made a hurtful comment about my appearance. I was shocked by how the family of the man I was planning to marry could act this way, but I reminded myself I was marrying Jonathan, not his family. We were starting our own life, and if I didn't enjoy being around his parents, I could always limit my interactions with them. With that in mind, I chose not to dwell on it. After our wedding, as we settled into our new condo, I began noticing Jonathan becoming more distant. One day, out of nowhere, he asked, "What about that woman in the blue dress at our wedding?" Given that several guests wore blue, I couldn't immediately figure out who he meant. "Which woman in the blue dress?" I asked. "The one who gave a speech as your best friend," he clarified. "Are you talking about Laura?" I asked, realizing it was her. "Yes, that's her," Jonathan replied, but there was something off in his voice. I was confused. "What's wrong with Laura?" I asked, sensing his unease. "Oh, it's nothing," he said quickly. "I just thought I saw someone who looked like her on my way to work. It reminded me she was your best friend at our wedding." His words felt strange, and I didn't know what to make of them. Before I could ask more, he awkwardly laughed and retreated to his room. Soon after, Laura called, excited. "Betty, my boyfriend's coming back to Canada next year," she said. Laura and her boyfriend had been together since high school, having known each other since childhood. Though he moved away in middle school, they stayed close through letters, and in high school, he finally confessed his feelings for her. I had always enjoyed hearing about Laura's relationship. Even though he'd been working abroad, their bond had remained strong. "Do you think he'll propose when he gets back?" I teased. Laura laughed. "Maybe, but you're always jumping ahead, Betty." "Well, if he does, make sure to invite me to the wedding," I joked. I'll expect another heartfelt speech like the one you gave at mine. Of course, she said, still laughing. But don't set the bar too high. We both laughed, sipping tea and enjoying our usual comfortable conversation. Laura had always been there for me, and I for her, supporting each other through everything. Around this time, I began noticing some changes in Jonathan. He started coming home later and later. Working late again tonight? I asked one evening as he walked in. Yeah, why? Do you think I shouldn't work? He snapped. Jonathan had never let go of his dream to become a voiceover artist, and though I admired his passion, it was starting to take a toll. He juggled part-time jobs to fund his training, but all his earnings went straight to that, leaving me to cover all of our living expenses. Saving money together was impossible, and the strain was becoming more obvious as his hours at his part-time jobs increased. My concern grew. You've been working too much, I said gently. They shouldn't be making you work overtime like this, especially for a part-time job. He dismissed me, unwilling to discuss it, but deep down, I knew his relentless pursuit of his dream was creating a rift between us, both financially and emotionally. One day, I finally spoke up. I'm really worried. I'm fine. More money is always better. Keep your opinions to yourself, Jonathan snapped. By that point, he had become so distant that he barely acknowledged me, referring to me as you instead of using my name. I had hoped marriage would bring us closer, but instead, his words became sharp and dismissive. The gentle voice I'd fallen for had turned cold and harsh. Jonathan had also started drinking more, and his voice sounded hoarse at times, troublesome for someone pursuing a career in voice acting. Yet he showed no interest in changing or discussing his health. Conversations became rare, and soon he avoided me altogether, even when we were in the same room. Amid this tension, Laura called to say she needed to talk, eager for a break from the tension at home. I agreed to meet her. We met at a cafe, where Laura carefully picked a booth with a clear view of the counter and staff. You picked this spot on purpose? I inquired, noticing how hesitant she seemed. Yes, she answered, her expression solemn. I wanted a spot where the staff could easily notice if anyone suspicious was around. A suspicious person? Is that really what you wanted to discuss? I asked, my concern growing. Laura nodded, her face tight with anxiety. She explained that ever since she left her job a month ago, she'd been feeling like someone was following her. Lately, she even had the unsettling sense that someone was watching her on her days off. The reason she had chosen that particular booth was because she feared the stalker might try to eavesdrop on us. Have you reported it to the authorities? I asked. I did, but since there's been no direct contact, they said they couldn't do much. She sighed. What about your boyfriend? Isn't he coming back next month? Maybe he can help you, I suggested, hoping she had someone who could support her. I planned to talk to him, but I wanted to discuss it with you first. You're closer, she explained, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The weight of Laura's words hung heavily between us, and as I sat there, I realized we were both facing unsettling situations, her with a possible stalker, and me with a marriage that seemed to be falling apart. I understood how desperate Laura was for support. She hadn't seen her stalker clearly, which made the situation even more terrifying. She couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, and the constant fear was starting to take its toll on her. Determined to help, I kept a discreet watch, hoping to spot the person following her. Meanwhile, I struggled with my own failing relationship with Jonathan, but I wasn't ready to talk about it just yet. Then, the shock hit. The person tailing Laura was none other than my husband, Jonathan. He had always claimed to be working late, but I noticed after his shifts, he would loiter near Laura's workplace and follow her when she left. The realization was chilling. The man who was causing my best friend so much fear was my own husband. Jonathan's actions shattered the image I had of him. The man I thought I knew seemed like a stranger now. The sinister grin on his face as he followed Laura sent a wave of cold dread through me, and the love I had once felt for him quickly turned to resentment. I knew I had to tell Laura the truth, so I urged her to move immediately for her safety. With help from her colleagues, we arranged for someone to drive her from the underground parking lot to her new home, taking every measure to ensure she was safe. As Laura left, Jonathan's anger began to bubble over. My parents are moving in here, so you need to go back to your parents' house, he suddenly demanded. I was stunned by his sudden and unreasonable ultimatum. If that's the case, then I guess I'm fine with a divorce, he spat, his temper flaring. Although I had considered divorce countless times before, hearing him say it so coldly was a harsh wake-up call. The truth of our crumbling marriage hit me hard. I couldn't believe Jonathan thought he could just kick me out of the home I was paying for, $3,200 a month, every month. Did he even remember that? I gave him a disbelieving look, but he merely snapped. Just leave already. My parents can't move in if you're still here. His words made no sense. Why do I have to leave? I don't understand, I said, trying to hold back my frustration. Fine, I'll take everything I bought with me, I replied, my voice calm despite the storm of emotions within me. Jonathan waved me off impatiently. Hurry up. Then, he muttered as he walked away. Without wasting any time, I contacted a buyback service. The next day, they arrived at our apartment. Jonathan watched, thinking I was simply packing to leave. His smug expression quickly faded when the workers began assessing our furniture and appliances, everything except for the items in his room. Afterward, the workers handed me a quote. The total value is $299,000, one of them said. Okay, sell it all, I responded, without a second thought. Jonathan's face went white with shock. He grabbed my arm, panicking. Why are you selling everything? My parents are moving in. How can they do that without any furniture? I jerked my arm free and stared him down. What do you mean? When we got married, you told me you were broke because of your acting classes. You asked me to cover the rent, the furniture, and all our living expenses. Now, with your parents moving in, you can handle the $3,200 a month yourself, right? Jonathan turned pale as the reality of the situation sank in. Desperate to salvage his pride, he tried to regain his composure. You think talking about money will stop the divorce? Who do you think you are? He sneered. I've already gotten close to a rich woman, he added, trying to strike a ridiculous pose. His words enraged me, but I stayed calm, remembering how Jonathan had been stalking Laura recently. If this was his idea of getting close to someone, it confirmed how twisted his perception of relationships was. Laura, who came from a wealthy family, her grandfather a successful businessman and her father his successor, never flaunted her wealth. She lived humbly, just like everyone else. Jonathan must have learned about Laura's background and saw her as his ticket to a better life. It disgusted me that he believed wealth made someone more desirable. But I knew the truth. Laura would never be interested in him. She had been with her high school boyfriend for years, and he was coming back soon with plans to marry her. Jonathan's delusions would soon be shattered, and I refused to stick around to see it happen. When I mentioned that Laura had felt uncomfortable because someone was stalking her, Jonathan was taken aback. He seemed surprised to hear that Laura found him creepy and that they weren't as close as he thought. I always walked Laura home, he defended himself. You're lucky I didn't call the police, I shot back, my words biting. But I didn't know she had a boyfriend, he protested. He's been away. She chose me over someone she doesn't even know, Jonathan insisted, trying to justify his misunderstanding of their relationship. They've been writing letters since childhood, and they talk every day. Unlike you, who only has part-time jobs, her boyfriend is successful. Even her dad likes him. Jonathan's expression grew deeply sorrowful as the reality of the situation finally dawned on him. His fantasies about forming a relationship with Laura were nothing more than delusions. As the workers arrived to collect our belongings, Jonathan seemed to relax a little. I guess you're all I've got now, he said. You always support my dream of becoming a voiceover artist, won't you? He asked, trying to mask his unease. I looked at him with cold resolve. Sorry, but I've already started divorce proceedings. From now on, we communicate through our lawyers, I said, emotionless. Still clinging to me, Jonathan pleaded. Don't say that. How have we managed all this time? We've managed ever since you discovered that my best friend Laura is wealthy. You've become distant and started spending more time with her after our wedding. I see now that I made a mistake, I replied, my voice steady. Jonathan broke down in tears, but his childish sobs only made him seem more pathetic to me. I couldn't bear to be near him any longer. Enough, I snapped. I've also informed your Uncle Uma about the divorce. You know he's a tough man. Well, he's decided to work for him, which means I can no longer support your voiceover dreams. You barely practice as it is. It's time to face reality and stop stalking Laura. If you don't, I'll call the police." With those final words, I walked away, determined to never look back. For now, I'd stay with my parents, though I considered moving closer to my job if I found a suitable place. As expected, Jonathan ended up working for his uncle, and his parents, who had been counting on him financially, moved in with him, all of them now working for his uncle. It seemed that exploiting others was a family tradition. A wave of relief washed over me as I escaped that toxic environment. Age wasn't the main issue anymore. I vowed to be more cautious when choosing my next partner. On a brighter note, after resolving everything with Jonathan, Laura invited me to her wedding. She introduced me to her long-term boyfriend, and I truly wished them both a lifetime of happiness. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Stay stunned.